Today's podcast is sponsored by Atomic Golf. If you need custom ball markers, divot repair tools, and more that are made from high-quality materials like solid copper and brass and look really good, then you should check out our friends at Atomic Golf. If courses like Old Barnwell, Landman, Sweetens Cove, and more are already working with them, then you should too. Visit atomicgolf.club and follow them on Instagram at Atomic Golf.
Now we had a long putt. It was like a 40-foot putt, and it was a big bender,
Yeah.
you know? And it was just one of those times, though. And it was pretty awesome, too, because it was like clear from the moment he hit it that it had a chance.
Mm-hmm.
And I still remember after it went in, just the exuberant celebration that we had. He would not, if I would have been a betting man, I would have put 0 on him being, one of the 7 birdies I have seen on that hole.
Yeah.
And right away, he's talking, this is what I'm going to remember. This is what's going to keep me coming back. This is my one shining moment. Hello, and welcome again to the Caddie Tales podcast. I'm Mark the Caddy, at Caddie Tales on Twitter, and I am joined by my friend, colleague, fellow caddy, Nick. And we are excited to talk to you about how this game of golf intersects so much with the game of life and how there's so many lessons that can be applied to both places. How you doing today, Nick?
Good, buddy. Just coming off a big weekend for my team here, and that was pretty exciting.
Right? Marquette basketball looking pretty good, and a lot of my money goes to Marquette. My daughter goes to Marquette, so the least they can do is provide me some entertainment, and I was happy to get that this weekend.
Yep. I didn't really watch much golf, but I watched a lot of basketball. So
this is one of those weekends where you just kind of got to say you're sucked into the whole tourney. It reminded me this weekend that marketing and format does matter, because I texted you, I think, college basketball is nowhere near as good as it was when I was in high school.
Yeah,
it's just not as good a product. I think that's objectively true. Yet the tourney is, I think, as popular as ever, if not more popular. I mean, gambling plays a role in that, but it certainly matters about format and marketing and tradition and all of that stuff. So, we're not going to get into this today, but I just started thinking about all the debates people have over PGA and LIV. There's probably some lessons that could be learned from how special the tournament still is to a lot of people. But in light of the tournament, I mean, it's just such a fun thing, and March Madness is such a opportunity for discussion. Today we're going to have a March Madness themed podcast and talk a little bit about some of the things you see in March Madness and apply it to golf and our life as caddies. Although it would have been kind of fun to have a bracket where we rank all the players and see that go through, but we don't really have time for that. But who would be your number 1 overall seed, Nick?
Probably Mr. Chill. Can play golf, that kind of guy,
Oh yeah. The people that we would kind of throw on the seedings, of course, somebody who's a really, kind of a good, easy golfer, and then the 16 seed might be that person we want to get eliminated right away, the club thrower or whatever. But like I said, we just decided instead to go with talking about some of the themes that come out of March Madness. And, I mean, the goal of March Madness, or the enduring sight that a lot of people reference for March Madness, is that song that gets played at the end of the tournament with the video montage, One Shining Moment. And,
One Shining Moment,
you want to be a part of that montage, at least on the good end. I think they show some people kind of crying too, but that song's pretty meaningful to a lot of people.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah.
So that got me thinking, what is the equivalent of one shining moment there on the golf course? And is there really a better one than the hole in one? And just that.
No doubt.
or like you hear this all the time on the golf course. After somebody hits a good shot, that's the one that'll keep you coming back. That one moment, that one shining moment. But Nick, how many hole-in-ones? I think you mentioned this before.
Yeah,
but how many hole-in-ones have you been on the course for?
I'm starting to lose track, but I think it's like 15.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a lot. So
I mean, that is crazy. Are there any particular ones that stand out more than others as a more shining moment than the other?
Yeah, I think I've talked about this one for a little bit before, but I'll expand upon it. So I was caddying for this guy that was a terrible golfer, and he got a hole in one on this hole that we have that it's a blind tee shot. You can't see the green, you can't see the pin, you can't see anything. So it's kind of a challenging hole for us to caddy sometimes because we have no clue where the ball ends up. So this guy hits a shot and he's hitting a 3-wood, and it's the hole itself is like 150 yards. It's not very much. He's hitting into a pretty stiff breeze, probably like 30 miles an hour. So I mean, like, give him a little bit of credit there. So he hits the shot and it's looking good, and I'm like, man, that's like right where I told him to hit it. That's hasn't happened ever for this guy, so that was surprising in itself. So we get up to the green, start looking for the ball. I'm expecting this ball to be on the green, probably pretty close to the pin. And we can't find it, and I look and I see his ball mark, and I'm like, oh man, it's like 10 feet short of the hole. I mean, that's a pretty good shot. That should be, if it's not on the green, it should be just off the green. And we're looking for probably like 2 minutes. And like everybody always says, you check the hole, which this guy's terrible, so it never even like clicked in my head. So finally, the other caddy like looks in the hole and he's like, "It's in," but he uses a little swear word in there. So, and I'm like, "No, you're lying," and he's like, "No, seriously." I'm like, "What?" And so the guy finds out, and he just like. I mean, his celebration was awesome. He started crying, and so it was, that's one that sticks out in my head for sure.
Yeah. No, I think that's the epitome of, the guy could have shot 150 that day, but he's got one shining moment. And when he thinks about that day, he's going to think about that shot for sure. And really, he's going to think about it the rest of his life. And that's one of the things that I love about caddying is that there is always that next shot. There's always that opportunity for redemption or a big celebration, no matter how the round is going. And when it does, it is fascinating to just see how it absolutely changes the mood. And, people can be, moping around the course or whatever and frustrated and declaring that they're giving up the game of golf, and it just takes one shot. And golfers know that. Everybody who's golfed knows that what that's like. That if you get one that's beautiful, an event that kind of came to mind for me is the 18th hole at one of our courses. I've seen like just about as many birdies on that hole as I've seen hole-in-ones. It's a really hard hole,
Yeah.
This last year I had a few more, so I think I'm up to like 5 hole-in-ones and 7 birdies.
Wow. Nice.
And not on that, 7 birdies on that hole in 5 years,
Yeah.
And I'm caddying. This is the second day I'm with a father and son, and the father and son, they were nice people, and we just really hit it off. But, there was nothing particularly special about their golf game. And the second day especially, the father had a really rough round. Okay, so, the wind is blowing. He's tired. I think they had stayed up the night before, as a lot of people do, having some wine and all that. Yeah. And we're on the 18th hole, and he hasn't hit a birdie the whole day, probably no pars. It was a rough round of golf.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it was like, let's just keep the encouragement up and whatever. He was emotionally mature, so it wasn't this big problem or anything. But he hits it. He's playing the correct tee box. That's part of how you can increase your odds of having one shining moment. But he hits it a nice drive up the middle, far enough that he has a chance at the green. But I've seen plenty of people have a chance at it, and it doesn't
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah,
But
it's
he
a tough
hits it to
shot.
the green. Now we had a long putt. It was like a 40-foot putt, and it was a big bender, you
Yeah.
know.
All the
And it
putts on
was
that
just
green are
one of
tough.
those times though, and it was pretty awesome too because it was like clear from the moment he hit it that it had a chance.
Hmm.
And I still remember after it went in, just the exuberant celebration that we had. He would not, if I would have been a betting man, I would have put 0 on him being, one of the 7 birdies I have seen on that hole.
Yeah.
And right away, he's talking. This is what I'm going to remember. This is what's going to keep me coming back. This is my
Yeah.
one shining moment. And it's just so fun, And I could picture that father and his son, and their wives were off at the spa or whatever. I could picture them driving home that day and just talking about it constantly. And
Yeah.
I love that. I love to see that kind of stuff going on. So
Hmm.
we want you folks out there, if we ever get to caddy for you, we're rooting for you to have that one shining moment. And,
Absolutely. Yeah.
let it happen. And it's awesome. It negates so much of the rough stuff that comes beforehand. So,
Hmm.
A guy who had a shining moment in this tournament who was unexpected. Nobody had ever heard of him before Thursday, and he
Yeah.
became a household name by Thursday night. Is Jack Golke,
Jack.
the player from Oakland University, the team that upset the mighty Kentucky Wildcats in the first round, and in so
Yeah.
doing, he set or tied a record for most three-pointers in a tournament game with 10
Did he?
three-pointers,
Wow.
and it just amazing. And I mean, by the next day, he's already getting NIL deals and doing commercials for
Hmm.
TurboTax, and I'm sure there's going to be some insurance NIL deals and all that because people kept saying he looks like an insurance salesman or an accountant.
He does.
And his life changed like that. So not only did he have his one shining moment, but he kind of gave hope that the average man can have a day,
Hmm.
and can play out of their mind.
Hmm.
And we don't maybe see that as much as we'd love to see it, but you ever have one of those where a high handicapper comes, Nick, and just plays out of their mind, or an average handicapper plays, a par round of golf, and just everybody's incredulous about it because it shouldn't be happening?
Yeah, it's happened. I had this one guy from Canada one time just like went on a ball strike, like put on a ball striking clinic and hit every green in regulation, and it was the coolest thing to see. That's probably the one that stands out in my mind the most.
Yeah,
But yeah, it happens. Like guys, play above their heads, and it's
yeah,
always fun to watch that.
yeah. I've seen it in matches before. And
Hmm.
you always know when you're with the sandbagger, the guy who said that his handicap's super high, so that
Yeah.
because the players let you know that he's cheating. They're giving him a hard time.
Uh,
But I've been on those matches before. Not like the guy who's the 17 handicap, and he comes out and gets like 8 or 9 pars, and the other
yeah.
team just doesn't even have a remote chance because of all
Yeah.
the strokes he's getting.
Uh-huh.
And you
Yep.
just see him, counting his dollar bills there because he's making a lot of money from his
Yeah.
but he's and it's just kind of funny. And this is how I think Kentucky should have reacted, because I've seen this from the other people on the other side. Is that you just throw up your arms and you're like, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
If somebody's going to come out and do this, then let
Yeah.
them win. Yeah.
I always love seeing the high handicappers get like a birdie on a par three, and their playing competitor, would theoretically have to get like a hole in one to
Yeah.
push on the hole, and it's like, what are we doing here?
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah,
It's fun, because those people don't generally have much success or win many bets or whatever, and
yeah,
they just come and they happen to. I don't know that it happens very often that it's 18 consistent holes, but maybe
hmm,
there's 8 or 9 holes that they're getting pars on that normally they're a double bogey player or whatever,
yeah,
and it just they're and I have found they're not usually cocky. They're usually kind of like
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
whatever,
the greatest
and
day.
then the
Yeah.
other guys are like Kentucky, like they're scratch players giving smokes, and they're like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
fine,
They're just in shock.
you're gonna hit 10 3-pointers against us and never miss, then we
Yeah.
go ahead and win. Today's your day. It's not
Yep.
our day. So I like seeing that. Like I said, I wish it happened more often than others. I guess it's easier to make 3-pointers than it is for somebody to suddenly get good at golf, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it can happen.
Mhm.
Speaking of 3-pointers, something that really occurs to me as I'm watching the tournament is that that's really changed the college game. I mean, there's so much 3-point
Yeah.
shooting going on
Yeah.
to the
Yeah.
point where, the divide between the really good team and the, a lesser seed isn't as wide as it used to be because
Yeah.
a smaller team can compete. But
Yeah.
anyway, it's really changed the game. I what's something you've caddied longer than me, Nick. What's
Mhm.
something that you've seen change the game over your period as a caddy?
Probably like people keeping more being more aware of like their stats and stuff like that. Like greens and regulation, that kind of stuff. Fairways and regulation. That's changed a lot. And I remember when I started, it didn't really change the game too much for everyone else, but as a caddy, it changed it when they came out with rangefinders.
Oh,
Because at that point we were like stepping everything off, and everything was just taking longer too. So
yeah, that's a total
right,
game changer as far
yeah,
as the caddy life. I remember when I got
rangefinders
trained.
changed it. Yeah,
I remember
yeah,
when I got trained, we were stepping everything off. That's how they train
yeah,
us.
yeah,
And not being as experienced or whatever as maybe some other caddies coming in, I didn't have a rangefinder for my first few loops because
mm-hmm,
I thought we don't use them. And
yeah,
I learned right away, oh, no, that's something you got to have. But,
mm-hmm,
and it really does change life for the better, for
yeah,
sure.
absolutely.
Similarly, I guess something that I'm seeing change, and it's more and more every year, is the amount of gadgets that players
Oh
come
yeah,
with.
yeah, yeah. I was gonna mention that too. Like apps have kind of changed the game too. Like
Yeah,
how you play the game. Like what shot you hit is smart relative to a riskier shot.
yeah.
Um,
The one challenge is when a player is so into their app or their watch or whatever that
yeah,
it
yeah,
renders you useless, or they just second guess you nonstop,
yeah,
or
yeah,
disagree. Players can second guess and disagree, but when it's like um, the app can become a hindrance on occasion. Not
yeah,
often,
yeah,
but
absolutely. Yeah,
I think that some of the features they're coming out with on watches and stuff are going to
yeah,
make it just a good player should improve hypothetically because if
yeah,
they're striking the ball well and stuff, these things are only going to help them do better. Just like good equipment has helped golfers hit the ball further or have been more forgiving and stuff like that.
yeah. Yeah, I remember this sticks out in my head for some reason. I remember one time I was caddying with another caddy, and his player had a golf watch, and so he'd shoot the number, and he'd be like 170 to the green or something like that. And the guy's like, my watch says 163, and the guy's like, well, your watch is giving you distance to the middle. I'm giving you distance to the pin.
Yeah.
And this guy they were just fighting about that like the rest of the day, and I was just like laughing.
Yeah,
But
right.
yeah, that's funny. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no kidding. And what I know, one of the new models of Garmin, I believe, is going to kind of be able to show the contours of the green and stuff.
Yeah.
And read the green.
Yep.
That'll be interesting to see how that plays
Yeah.
out because
Yeah.
it still doesn't measure speed and some of that
Yeah.
kind of variables that are out there for players. And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
I am hopeful that
What
it all becomes a help.
Once again, I don't want to get golf rules Twitter up in arms, but I believe it is illegal to use those devices on the course.
Oh.
So yeah, so
Yeah,
somebody's
yeah.
second guessing you, just be like, it's not legal. So
Yeah, right.
yeah,
Yeah. Oh my. They certainly for tournament play, but the average
yes,
Joe will find a way to
exactly.
sneak it all in.
Yes,
So
yep.
Hey, fellow golfers, this is Robbie from Best Ball. One of the most popular names in the golf accessory market today is Western Birch. Stop reaching in your pocket for boring plastic or plain white golf tees and elevate your game with premium wooden golf tees from Western Birch. You can customize both the hardwood and bamboo tees with one of their signature stripe patterns in a wide variety of colors. These tees are stylish enough to stand apart from the crowd, traditional enough to align with golf's heritage, and durable enough to make you forget about using anything else. Enter the code BESTBALL in the promo field in your shipping cart to add a free gift to your order. So visit westernbirch.com and get your own premium wood golf tees in the style that suits your game.
One of the things that I learned this weekend that surprised me is that Gonzaga has now the most consecutive Sweet 16s. I would have thought somewhere in there that they've been upset,
Yeah.
And I remember, by the way, this was all the way back in, I think, 1999. I happened to watch one late night Gonzaga game on ESPN, and a dude hit a bunch of three-pointers. And so when I was filling out my bracket, I knew nothing other than that.
Yeah.
And I picked them to the Elite Eight. And that was when nobody knew what Gonzaga was or who they were, and they went to the Elite Eight. And so they've always had a little special place in my heart. But
Good.
They have the most consecutive Sweet 16s at 9. And so that got me thinking just about the beauty of consistency, because they haven't been fortunate enough yet to win a title.
No, they've been close, but yeah.
Yeah, and not always the Final Four. But man, it's a joy to caddy for that consistent player, that is going to hit the ball generally the same way every time. Can do what is instructed and stuff. You got somebody in mind that you've ever caddied for like that, Nick?
Yeah, so I caddied for a guy that was a pro at a really tough course in Dallas, and this course is pretty well known. And it's known for being super tough. And this guy just got done playing like I think 4 years of college golf, so he was still pretty good. And so we get to hole 18, the one you were talking about before, and he's like 3 under at this point. I'm just like, oh my gosh, as long as like nothing bad happens, this guy's gonna shoot under par. And like at that point, I don't think I've ever seen anybody shoot under par. It really doesn't happen very often at our course. So we get to the 18th hole, and as you know, at the end of the fairway is a ravine. And you can't, so the number we tell people is like, hey, hit like 250, hit 250 yards, don't hit like 251 yards, because if you do, you're going to be in a terrible situation. You're going to lose your ball. And
by the way, just as a quick aside, that's always the one hole of the whole day where the guy actually drives the ball as far as he says he can. And
yes, yeah,
and
absolutely.
100% of the time going to crush it. On the one drive there, you want him to miss it a little bit. But anyway, that's an aside. Go on, yeah.
Well, that's what I'm getting to. So he like grabs his hybrid and like absolutely nukes it. And everybody's like, good shot, good shot, good shot. And I'm like, he smoked it. So he must have hit it like probably 251 or something like that. So we get up there and I'm like, oh my gosh. I see his ball. It's over the edge. It's like kind of buried in some fescue a little bit. It's playable. But he's on a downhill slope, terrible stance, and we got probably about 150 yards. And this like speaks about emotional maturity. He's like, oh, I got that. I'm like, what? I'm like, okay. So he like grabs like a 9-iron or something like that. Gets down in his stance, which was like an impossible stance, and then proceeds to hit a shot that just will stay in my memory forever. He hits it to like 5 feet on hole 18, and I'm just like, I feel like I just saw something like superhuman, and he went on to make the putt and ended up shooting like I think like 68 or something like that. And it was just an unreal day, and that guy will go down as the best player I've seen or that I've caddied for. So, yeah.
Consistency, the ability to, know your distances, all that kind of stuff is really underrated. I had a group out a few years ago, guys all being recruited by D1 or already signed by D1 colleges. Good group of kids, still in high school, but good group of kids. Their dads were with them. There was one player in particular who was, I mean, good player and all that, but he was physically the least impressive, and not as spectacular as the other guys were or could be. He got 18 pars that day. I've never seen it before or after. He got 18 pars.
Just consistent.
So, nothing. I got to thinking about him because there was nothing memorable, so to speak, like the other players, and he, I think, scored the best. He got 18 pars, and how awesome is that? So, the consistency is an impressive thing to watch, and it's underrated because I think a lot of people would want to maybe hit it further than he hit it or whatever. And it's like, no, this guy put together a par round at a very difficult course just by being consistent, by avoiding major mistakes, by generally, striking the ball well and stuff. So he was like the Gonzaga. And so on a lot of days, he might lose to these other guys who are a little bit, they're more the North Carolina or Duke of the world. But he's consistent, and so every now and then it's going to be his day, and he's going to break through and win that title. So I thought that was pretty neat to see. So speaking of, though, the Dukes of the world, I thought this has got to be the school. I don't know, maybe you think there's a different one, but it's got to be Duke. The school that people kind of love to hate. They're really good, but they're viewed, and whether it's true or not, but they're viewed as more arrogant than other places. Would you agree that's the stereotype?
Yeah, it's got to be Duke, but this tournament, I feel like for me, it's going to be Purdue. I think Purdue's going to be that way, just because of Zach. Zach Edey,
I think UConn, because their coach is getting annoying. But in general, if you said, I think if we did a little poll about who's the villain or which team do you hate the most, I mean, they have their people who love them. Yeah. But certainly I think Duke is the villain for a lot of people and is viewed as arrogant, and, because a lot of the kids are viewed as rich and entitled and all that kind of stuff. So it got me thinking about, like, who's that villain that comes to our course. Now, it's not good business for me to talk too in depth about that, but I will say that every now and then I get players. This is the hardest group to caddy for, perhaps, is you do get some players who are just out of touch because they've had such a good life. We see our fair share of players who have made a lot of money or grew up in a family that already had a lot of money, and so you'll ask them also what college they went to, and you're hearing schools that, like, you never hear of from average normal people that Ivy League schools or wherever. And if there's a group that I think kind of looks through us, maybe treats us a little more disrespectfully, certainly isn't enamored or impressed with the blessing of being able to play at a place like that or whatever, it would be kind of those 30-something-year-old guys who grew up with those kind of good fortunes, and maybe they're just a little more dismissive and disrespectful. And one of the saddest things I've ever had to acknowledge, how much I love the University of Michigan, especially their football team,
Sure do.
And I used to live near there. It's a big part of my life. I would say their graduates sometimes are the worst of the bunch. And it's just kind of crushed my soul. They're just not usually nice people. So last year I did have a guy who was a Michigan grad who had seen me tweet something about that, and he said, I'm going to bring a group, and we're going to prove to you Michigan guys aren't bad. You know what? And he did. Like, he came, they were awesome.
There we go.
But
awesome.
But the thing is, he went to Michigan, and he knew exactly what I was talking about. So that's, like, he wasn't, like, defending him. He's like, I know exactly what you're talking about. So that really kind of broke my heart, because it was, like, not just one group like that. I've probably had, like, 10. And so they're kind of, like, just more arrogant, more dismissive. And in general, most people are really cool out there. But I find that really hard. Like, is just I don't like it when people look down on one another or whatever. And you
Yeah.
get that
Yeah.
small fraction of people who are just they're in a different world.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you said, dismissive. I think that's a perfect way to describe those people. Like they just really, don't really care what you have to say, and it makes for a long day for us.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, they and like sometimes too. Like I find that I'm big on people really being appreciative of the blessings they have, and I want people to look around and say, "Look at this golf course we're at," and gosh, the fact that we can spend this kind of money and whatever. And sometimes it just doesn't seem like people are as thankful. I don't want to judge their hearts, so I don't know for sure, but I just would encourage people to really be on guard against that. Have a thankful spirit. Have a kind of tone in your life where you're respectful of everybody, no matter what position they're working in and stuff. The golf community is probably more susceptible to that than other sports because you do need a certain kind of income level to do it consistently, and so it probably earns a reputation in that regard that is a caricature, but plays itself out as true with some people. A few more, Nick, before we finish up here.
Okay.
I was watching Grand Canyon University at the end yesterday. You and I were texting
GCU,
back and forth during it.
Yep.
And, man, they were just terrible hitting free throws. And I think I heard 14 out of 27 they made, or 13 out of something like that.
Ouch.
But, they were within one with a few minutes to go to go into the Sweet 16. And if they would have just hit their free throws, and I saw that a lot, these people can't hit free throws. What's something on the golf course that you think, like, hey, if people just practice this easy task, it would just really improve their scoring or their rounds a lot? And it's not that hard to do, but if they were just consistent at that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and we've talked about this before, but I think leg putting's an underrated skill to have. Just being able to get something up there near the hole, that's always going to help the score out. Not trying to necessarily make every 40, 50 footer. Also basically just anything short game related, chipping is always a good skill to have.
I think that's becoming more understood, is practice your short game first. Get good at that first. The Tiger Woods method there. And
Right. It's not physically demanding. It's you're not going to hurt yourself doing it. But everybody likes sitting on the range for hours just banging balls. So
I think just hitting 3 or 4 foot putts that are straight. Just learning how to do that to where it's super consistent. People miss them way more than you think. And that just kills a score. And I've heard about Tiger Woods spending like an hour just hitting. He's got to hit 100 straight 4-footers or whatever before he would quit. And 100 straight, and it's like, this is the best player in the world, and was, and he's doing that, and it's like practicing free throws. So I think getting consistent at some of the stuff that's not as difficult to do would really help people. Lag putting is huge. Short putting, short game, for sure. So, all right. So the most exhilarating thing about a tournament game is the buzzer beater. The most memorable one is one from my childhood. I was in high school when it happened. The Duke over Kentucky, Grant Hill pass to Christian Leitner. So if you're in my generation, that is just embedded in your memory. Another huge one from when I was in college or had just graduated college was Bryce Drew from
from Valpo. He's at GCU now. GCU's head coach. Yeah.
And so those buzzer beaters really stand out in my memory. But the thing that you'll remember too is just the exhilarating celebration afterwards. You ever see people just having a celebration that makes you laugh or that you get to be a part of, and it's just super fun?
Yeah, I hate to keep going back to the same story, but it's with the hole-in-one guy when he called his wife and just started weeping on the phone to her, and I was just like, I don't know why, like that just stands up to me because I've never seen anybody like physically cry on the golf course from a shot. But yeah,
Yeah.
that stood out to me for sure.
Yeah, I love seeing people
Um,
like I've seen people like literally shaking after
yeah,
like
yeah,
a hole in
yeah,
one, and they're
it's got
just
that effect. Yeah,
it's awesome to be a part of. The first hole in one I was a part of, I just remember celebrating so aggressively. I was pretty pumped up, and
I can
so were the
imagine.
players, obviously. But I was like,
Yeah,
because I don't know, maybe I just never thought I would see one. I knew other guys had, but
yeah,
um,
yeah. It's surprising what the first time you see one.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and so that was super cool. I had some guys who were in a huge match, betting thousands of dollars,
Hmm.
and it comes down to the 18th hole and a final putt, and I'll be the first one to admit I want nothing to do with being a part of reading that putt or what I'm saying.
The pressure
And
packed read.
yeah, and I remember
Yeah.
my players goes. They win the match. They won like $5,000.
Oh,
Okay,
nice.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I just remember myself like the fist, just everything, just kind of like
Yeah.
felt so good. And then them, hugging each other and celebrating. What
Hmm.
these were the kind of people. It's hard for us to understand. $5,000 meant nothing to either side. Generally, if you're betting that kind
Yeah.
of money, it's no big deal out
Yeah.
there. But just the celebration and being a part of that, it's like we get our own little slice of what these big time athletes get to
Yeah.
experience.
Absolutely.
It's on
Absolutely.
it's on our little local scale, but we
Yeah.
get a piece of it every
Yeah.
now and then, and
Yeah.
it's great to be a part of it.
Yeah. I remember one time I was caddying, like, there was this, like, corporate event where they probably brought, like, 200 people there. And my guy, they played 18 holes, and then they got to the end, and then there's a playoff. And then so all 200 of these people are watching everyone play for the next, like, the three playoff holes or whatever. So on hole 17, my guy's got like 30 feet left for birdie, and he asked me for the read, and I'm like, red edge, and he's like, oh, that's it, huh? I'm like, yeah. And then he hits this like 30-foot putt, and like all 200 people around us are just like
Yeah.
going nuts, and then yeah, that's kind of like that made me feel like a pro
Yeah.
for maybe a day.
Yeah, it's super
So
cool too when you're on the 18th green and there's players who finished. Maybe you've had a few cocktails and they're all standing up there cheering and whatever. You feel like you're a part of
yeah,
something bigger,
right.
and usually they get pretty animated up there, and the celebrations or the boos and the heckles can be pretty intense to be a part of. But
Uh-huh.
I've talked before about, and I close our pod each week by reminding people that golf and life will mirror each other. I'm reminded this week. You have your days like the James Madison and Yale and stuff had in the first round, and they get an upset, and then they get blown out in the second round. It's a reminder, like
Mhm.
golf, one day might not have anything to do with the other, and we might
Yeah.
play out of our minds one day, and the next day we come back down to earth. There's so many things that parallel there, but it's special to be a part of it, and sports is such a fun diversion. And this week, yeah, it was basketball, but even then, you can kind of see your golf life in it. So, thanks for the discussion as always, Nick, and to all of you
Yeah.
out there for listening. And again, I want to remind you that life, much like golf, on this side of the ground, always provides another shot, another opportunity, and it's full of hope and amazing possibility. So take yours.